Men's ODIs, or BRODIs for short, are in a little bit of trouble. Compared to the previous ICC World Cup cycle, Australia, India, Pakistan, and England, the four most profitable teams, have played 34% fewer one-dayers in the ongoing cycle. One-day cricket has become almost cricket's neither here nor there format, where Test cricket is like the vinyl record, beloved by purists and cricket hipsters, still churning out bangers like this year's Ashes cycle. And T20s are like the streaming platforms, ubiquitous, absolutely dominating the market right now. ODIs have been like CDs. Absolutely crushed the market 23 years ago, but have they served their purpose? For Gen Z viewers who might not know what a CD is, they're like shiny donut-shaped versions of a floppy disk. That should clear it up, right? We're now on the doorstep of another ODI World Cup, so perhaps it's a good time to ask, what does this dip in standing for the format mean for this tournament? Hi, I'm Andrew Fidel Fernando, one of ESPNcricinfo's lead writers and guy who's about to heroically jump over this wall just to get a more dramatic opening shot. Welcome to the Plunge. Before we get to the World Cup, it might be helpful to understand the epic Lord of the Rings journey that ODI cricket has been on. Although played domestically since the 1960s in England, one-dayers didn't really become internationals until they were almost accidentally invented in 1971, when after the first 4 days of an MCG Ashes test were washed out, England and Australia decided to play a game that could be settled on a single day. Now, a lot of people didn't expect more than 20,000 people to turn up, but 46,000 rocked up despite it being a Tuesday, and thus sponsors, marketability, and sweet, sweet dollar bills, baby, the ODI was born.
The dollar bills were so sweet in fact that Kerry Packer, an Australian media mogul, launched the unsanctioned World Series Cricket, a competition that ran through the late 70s which featured an Australian 11 and a West Indies 11 among others. Most importantly though, World Series Cricket pioneered such earth-shattering concepts such as coloured clothing, a ball that was white, sight screens that were black, and playing matches partially in the night when people who were either working or childcaring could actually sit down and take in a game of cricket. Wild.
Now, at this point in the story, I won't say that the ICC was being run by old men who barely knew what they were doing, but I also won't not say that. Because it took until 1992 for all of World Series Cricket's innovations to be folded into the officially sanctioned international game, and all they had to do was copy-paste from Kerry Packer.
And it is in the 90s in which ODI cricket really flew. Australia were playing an annual tri-series, as they'd done through the 80s as well. Sharjah was hosting a ton of India-Pakistan matches. Sachin Tendulkar was desert storming. South Africa were being reintegrated after the fall of apartheid. And yes, England did bring the vibe down, but we're focusing on fun things like Sana Jayasuriya ripping up the new ball overs, Waqar Younis carrying out a personal vendetta against batters' toes, and Michael Bevan and Chris Harris finishing off matches for their teams. But while Bevan was doing it with the strength of his muscles, Chris Harris was heroically doing it while bald.
But then came the 21st century and the era of the 5-match ODI bilateral series, and oh my lord, even just saying that sentence almost put me to sleep. For various reasons, including cricket wanting to cut down on potentially dodgy tournaments in unusual locales, the tri-series and the quadrangular, a word I didn't just make up, both went out of fashion. What we ended up with instead was the same two teams duking it out over a 5-match series in the same country over a period of about 2 weeks, I guess, that no one can quite tell because nobody can remember them.
Just as one example, does anyone recall this second ODI in a 5-match series between Sri Lanka and New Zealand, which was played in Pallekele and which Sri Lanka apparently went on to win by 14 runs on Duckworth Lewis?
If you don't recall this match, it's probably not because you're an idiot. I mean, you might be, but I certainly can't call you that because apparently I was covering this match in a professional capacity and I still don't have a single shred of memory about ever having been there. And I would have been to the pre- and post-match press conferences. I would have sent messages to my colleagues updating on the rain situation. I would have been watching every single ball almost and been super invested in things like Tom Latham's 2 of 18 balls. And despite my having looked over the scorecard to try and jog the memory last night, absolutely nothing came back.
But for all the stultifying sameness that multiple one-day internationals between the same teams wreaked upon us, the World Cups were still always box office. In 2003, Kenya made a deep run into the tournament and shook things up, while India also made a big charge and South Africa pulled off one of the more epic of their chokes in a tournament they themselves were hosting. The 2011 version in India, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh was one of the best ever. The 2015 event had Brendan McCullum's team make that manic charge into the World Cup final. And we know the 2007 World Cup is frequently derided as being too long, but maybe that's largely by people whose teams didn't make it out of the group stage. Because what I remember from it was Lasith Malinga's 4 wickets and 4 balls, Adam Gilchrist's manic World Cup final 100, and Andrew Flintoff upturning a pedal boat while reportedly smashed out of his mind.
Whatever is wrong with ODIs, however much it seems outdated in a world that switches between niche obsessive interest and fleeting mass appeal, our love for the ODI World Cup is still driven by those memories, and it remains an incredibly sought-after tournament. One way to measure this is through money. Broadcasters, when they bid for an ICC cycle, bid for all manner of tournaments, men's, women's, under 19, across formats. But the ODI World Cup still dominates their thinking, so much so that in the current World Cup cycle at least, the ODI World Cup is 40% of the value that broadcasters have placed on it. And that's way more than what the T20 Men's World Cup attracts. Partly this is because the ODI World Cup is the longest ICC event, and partly because ODIs can take up to 9 hours, of which, fingers crossed, 90 minutes can be ads. And you can also squeeze in those banner ads from the bottom and the sides. And you can even cut away in the middle of an over and come back having barely missed anything. And all of this is enough to get even the most hardened capitalists pulse racing and heart beating really fast, presuming, of course, that they have one.
But there's also value way beyond the money. This is a tournament that's been going on for almost 50 years and has happened roughly every 4 years through that stretch, which helps build expectation and gives teams, fans, broadcasters and sponsors something to aim for. The ODI World Cups trigger our sporting memory more than any other cricketing competition. We remember that in 1975 and 1979, West Indies dominated the opposition, then went on to rule the Test cricket world for 15 years. We remember that in 1983, Kapil Dev took that catch off the bat of Viv Richards as India became champions for the first time, sparking obsession in one of the most populous countries in the world. The 1992 World Cup victory is way more mythologized in Pakistan than the 2009 T20 World Cup victory, not least because the 1992 win set in motion one of the funnest tournament tropes of all time. Pakistan sneaking into the knockouts, then blowing the roof off the place in the big matches, as they also did in 2009 and 2017. In Sri Lanka, many more celebratory araks are downed on March 17, which is the anniversary of the 1996 World Cup victory, than whatever day it was when Sri Lanka won the 2014 World Cup, massive as those T20 win celebrations were in Colombo.
Even in the 21st century, Australia's dominance of world cricket was reflected in their 3 World Cup wins between 1999 and 2007. And then the 2019 final gave us perhaps the most spectacular hour of cricket that many of us have ever seen. Trent Boult messing up a catch on the boundary, the kind of catch he'd caught safely in the tournament just before. Ben Stokes timing the absolute pants off a throw from deep mid-wicket and placing it beautifully through fine leg when he was just reaching out to try and make his ground. Kumar Dharmasena doing the most Kumar Dharmasena of all Kumar Dharmasena things. And then England winning on the slightest technicality. It was like an ancient epic, except it played out right in front of us on broadcast TV, completely unscripted.
And if, after all this, you're still doubting the impact and the importance of the ODI World Cup, why don't we ask this question? MS Dhoni has won virtually every trophy he has ever contested. But when you bring to mind a single image from his career, which is the one that leaps out? I mean, it's obviously this one since we're literally showing it to you, but would it have been any other?
Yes, they last for way longer than a month, but maybe it's because they go for so long that ODI World Cups tend to take on a life of their own. And even this 10-team tournament does at times truly feel like a global festival of cricket in a way that no other tournament does. We remember ODI World Cups having been great in the past, and we expect them to be great again in the future. And the boring games we've watched disappear. The dull passions of play dissolve. Will ODI World Cups ever be as good again? Will the 2027 version of this tournament, which features 14 teams, still grab fans by the collar, push them up against the wall, and lay on that desirous, passionate, and consensual French kiss that previous editions have? We don't know.
The future of the ODI is shrouded in uncertainty because even the MCC has recommended a ramping down of ODIs over the next 10 years. And buddy, if a 236-year-old organization which didn't allow women until 1998 finds you stuffy, boring, and possibly irrelevant, you've probably got problems. But for now, 48 years after the first edition of this World Cup was played, it still remains the biggest prize in cricket.